Welcome back to the Stay Spicy podcast. This season is all about leadership. So we've been busting myths, we've been challenging some perceptions and discussing new perspectives, approaches and concepts when it comes to leadership. You might be curious about the title of today's episode, How to Make Leadership Lemonade. Basically, this is playing off of the concept of shit happens, because it does to all of us. And we go through all kinds of changes in our lives. Sometimes we choose the change. Sometimes the change chooses us. And the only choice ultimately that we get is, what are you going to do with it? And so what we want to talk about today is when life gives you those lemons, how do you take that and make leadership lemonade? Basically, how do you help it inform your purpose, your approach, your values, and what can you do with it that's positive? Because we have the perfect guest to talk about that today, who believes that there is a lesson you can take from literally everything. Sherry, do you want to introduce our guest?
Of course, Bean Gill. Welcome to the Stay Spicy podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So Bean, you describe yourself as a few things, awesome things, an inclusion warrior, paralysis recovery pioneer, change maker, and happily divorced. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Ditto. Sherry's married. Happily,
I hope.
Yes, of course. And you've spoken to all kinds of audiences on a bunch of different topics.
Yep.
One of them being, rejecting the impossible, standing strong when life gets flipped upside down. That's one of your keynotes.
Yeah.
And also modeling diversity. So the transformational impact of unrelenting inclusion. I mean, who doesn't want to talk about that right now? And these are very hot topics and things we've been kind of talking about on the Stay Spicy podcast. So, through researching and reading about you, I learned quickly that when you turned 30, your life had completely changed. You left an abusive relationship. Your father left your family. And during a vacation, a virus paralyzed you from the waist down overnight. So an incredible amount of challenges, an incredible amount of adversity that, a lot of people couldn't imagine experiencing. But what I also learned from you is that you managed to use these experiences as a pathway for a greater good. It instigated your own leadership journey and your inclusion revolution, as we like to call it.
We like revolution on the Stay Spicy
Yes.
podcast.
We'll talk about inclusion, revolution, and battle on this podcast. So, Bean, can you take us to your story and talk a little bit about how these experiences framed your leadership journey?
Oh boy. Yeah, sure. I mean, most of those things happened within 6 months. That's why I say 2012 was, and I hope remains, the worst year of my life, because I don't want to do more than I had to deal with in that year. And you're right. Like, a lot of people wouldn't know what to do in these situations, and neither did I. I had no idea. And back then, I had no idea how to communicate. I couldn't feel my feelings, let alone talk about them, but I was really good at numbing myself. And that landed me in my wheelchair. And it was my best friend who said, this is God literally stopping you in your tracks and making you deal with your shit. And because I had been trying to run away from my trauma and hide it and sweep it under the rug and numb it for as long as I possibly could. But one of the silver linings was working with a psychologist, learning how to communicate, learning how to feel my feelings, allowing myself to feel them, label them, and work through them instead of hiding from them. So I think like a lot of that work helped me find out who I am as a person, because I really didn't know. And then of course, through that, you find your leadership traits and stuff, right? And like, had you asked me then, are you a leader? I would have laughed in your face and said, absolutely not. Right? But now, like, hindsight, you're like, oh, I guess I've always been a leader. And I just didn't recognize that I had that potential in me, and that I give people permission to be themselves and do things just by myself being myself. So yeah, it's been a wild journey.
It's amazing. And I think when you talk about this really kind of led you to being inclusion oriented in terms of leadership. And you talk about yourself as an inclusion warrior. So we love that term. What's that battle been like for you?
Hard.
Yeah.
In one word, hard. It's difficult because people, just in terms of disability alone, you automatically get underestimated. People automatically think that you need help with everything. Their stigmas and biases show up in what they say to you and how they treat you. You're both hyper visible and invisible at the same time. Dealing with people apologizing to you for no reason. And it's something so small, but when it happens day after day after day, year after year after year, it really starts to irritate you. And so now I just start saying to people, you better be sorry. And then they kind of look at me and I'm like, well, what did you apologize for?
Right.
And then I want people to think about it, right?
What do they apologize for?
They're sorry for me. They feel sorry that I'm in a wheelchair. They are pitying me. They have sympathy for me. And I don't want that.
No.
I don't want that. I want empathy. I want respect and dignity. And I also want everybody just to check that, right? Why are you doing the things that you do? And just a quick story, a couple of weeks ago, I was at Sobeys and I was getting out of my car and this lady walks by and she's like, oh, can I help you? And I was like, no, I'm good. And she's like, okay. And then she lingered, right? And I was in a bit of a spicy mood myself. So I was like, can I ask you a question? And I'm like, why did you ask me if I need help? And she was like, I don't know. And I'm like, do you really think that all people with disabilities go about their lives waiting for an able-bodied savior to come help them? And she just kind of had a cute quizzical look on her face and I could see the gears turning and she was like, I really don't know. And I'm like, I want you to think about this. If I'm a person with a disability getting out of my car that I drove.
That you do every day.
That I do every day, multiple times a day. Do I just sit here and wait for somebody to help me? Do I go sit in front of a door and wait until somebody comes and opens it for me? Do I wait until somebody packs my groceries up for me? You know what I mean? Think about these things. And she was just she was thinking about it. And I said to her, reflect on this and then talk to your family about it. And then tell them to talk to their families and tell people to talk about it because it's super annoying. And I want you to stop offering help? No, right? Because there are people who do need help. Yeah. And the irony is when I need help, there's nobody there to help me. And it's so frustrating.
It's so if you see someone struggling, regardless of their situation, right, then you offer help. But if somebody doesn't appear to be struggling,
right,
to offer them help.
Yeah. So it's just, it's, being inclusive. We talk a lot about gender in inclusion. We talk a lot about race in inclusion. We don't talk much about ability or disability in inclusion, and that needs to change, right? Because technically, everyone will have a disability. You're either born with it, you either acquire it later in life, or you're going to age into it. None of us are immune.
I think I watched one of your, a snippet of your keynote, and you commented on how many people in this room wear glasses. And you're like, you all have a disability. And my mind just exploded at that. I was like, yes, I wear glasses. I mean, I don't right now. I'm going blind today. But yeah, absolutely. So
it's just because it's normalized, right?
Definition of
glasses are normal.
Yeah.
And it's normal to see people wearing them. It's normal for that. And then, so my question is when do wheelchairs become normal? When do walkers become normal? When do amputees and prosthetics become normal? When do hearing aids become normal? Today, that's the answer, is today.
Right.
Right? These are all devices that we use to live our lives. And so I think we just need to do some introspection and reflection on what are our biases and stigmas that we have towards other people, because we all have them, myself included. And I had to dismantle a lot of these because now I'm the person with the disability. And am I all of these things that I thought they were? No. Right? What do I want to be? I want to be stylish. I want to be sexy. I want to be successful. I want to be healthy. I want to be fun. And is that what I thought of people with disabilities? No. Right? So if I can dismantle that and relearn that about myself, I think everybody has the opportunity to as well.
In my view, you're all of those things. Actually, the first thing I noticed about you was your style, because we met at the farmer's market with Andrea's booth, and you came up and I was like, damn, that girl's style. That's the first thing I noticed. I was like,
thank you.
Yeah. So absolutely. It's you are, to me, that's being a leader, is living it, modeling it. That's part of how we break down those stereotypes.
Yeah.
is there, and speaking about it is another part of it. When did you start to think, or did you at any point think, I have to like lead this conversation or lead this movement?
I didn't think about it initially. And then it was one moment that happened very clear as day when I saw Rick Hansen speak. He came to Edmonton. My friend had an extra ticket. He's like, do you want to go? I was like, yeah, for sure. And, he's the man in motion, right? He took after Terry Fox. He was friends with Terry Fox, and he decided to wheel his wheelchair around the world, and he did it. And that day when I saw him speaking on the stage, and it was at the Winspear Center, giant stage, one man in a wheelchair, and he commanded the whole stage. He was so captivating, you couldn't look anywhere else. And I remember sitting there watching him, and I remember thinking to myself, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And that was the day I became an ambassador for his foundation. And yeah, that kickstarted everything. It's wild.
Well, and it sounds like being a warrior and being a leader for you too is also really embracing uncomfortable conversations. Not just in the Sobeys parking lot, but anywhere you go. How are you finding that working with clients and in the workplace? And does everyone know, or do people do they suddenly treat you differently when they're working with you?
Well, I'm the boss at my workplace. And so like Nancy and I, we've set the tone, right? It is a very inclusive environment. We have hard conversations because they need to be had. And yeah, do people get uncomfortable? Of course, right? We've had the topic of racism has come up a number of times in our building, especially in 2020, and even more so after the Don Cherry scandals happened, right? And, I heard people saying, oh, well, you can't say this, you can't say that anymore. And so then I wheeled up to this older white man and said, what is it that you want to say?
Right.
Is it sexist? Is it homophobic? Is it racist?
Why are you upset about not being able to say it?
Yeah. So you can still say those things, but outside.
Yeah. You can say it, but there will be consequences now.
Yes, there will be. And inside these walls, those words are not appreciated. They're not welcome.
Yep.
Right? So you have to set that tone. And do people like it all the time? No, absolutely not. But I don't care.
Yeah. We've had to live with it for so long.
Straight up.
I'm not here for that sympathy for the people who don't want to be inclusive and respectful.
Yeah.
So on that note, from a leader's perspective, somebody who has a staff, owns a business, what does inclusion mean for you? Like, how do you build that environment? Because that's something we haven't talked about yet on the podcast. We really wanted to talk about it from a leadership perspective.
By modeling it, first and foremost. I have disability etiquette talks with every single staff member, every volunteer, every student, about how we talk to people with disabilities, how we treat them, what our motto is at REU, which is choosing to see potential and refusing to talk about limitations. The period, and stop there. I talk about asking them to check their biases and stigmas and stereotypes and write them down, work through them, because we all have them. And until we're first aware of these things, we can't change it. So if we're all going to just have this veil that says, I'm not racist, I'm not homophobic, I'm not these things, I have 2 Black friends, right? That doesn't make you not racist. Yeah, with my clients too, we talk about these things all the time. But it's more with the able-bodied population of watch your tone of voice, right? It's one thing that you can say that may come across patronizing or infantizing. Even babies don't want to be infantized. Adults don't want that either, right? And so learning, even if you're encouraging someone hey, good job, let's go. That's what we want. We don't want to hear, good job, sweetie, right?
Good try.
Yeah. And so it's those little nuances that often have, they don't have malicious intent behind them, but it's these little things that people do or say that are not received very well. And so I point them out in the first conversation. I start talking about these things because I want you to be aware of it before you say something like that in front of one of my clients. And then we have to have a different conversation.
There may not be intent behind it, but there is a judgment behind it. Yes. And I find I keep going back to that saying that I hold on to all the time. If you're not curious, you're judging. And a similar sort of tone thing that drove me crazy is, when you're going through maybe breakup, a job loss. And instead of being like, hey, how are you? They're like, how are you doing? Friggin' hated that. I was like, one more person does that to me. Because then how I felt at least was I felt fine. But then I felt like I almost had to, I was expected to be bad, like to be down or something and then I'd be like, oh, I'm fine. And then they would kind of give that tone back again. And it was like, until I was like, well, but it's tough and I'm working through, but that wasn't authentic. And so by putting your tone on someone, you're actually like sort of forcing them into that, that stereotype.
And then you end up comforting that person.
Yeah.
And it's just like, how did this happen?
Yeah.
How did this just get flipped and now I'm comforting you in your own, like,
making you feel okay about my situation.
And you're realizing, oh, maybe I am ableist and maybe I am this. But now it's up to me to like comfort you in this. So weird.
Yeah, it is weird.
It's so ingrained in society. I mean, my brother has a disability, and when you said, only talking about, not talking about limitations, that's all you hear your whole life is the limitations. The limitations are the focus. So I'm very happy to see a new way of looking at disability and a new way of talking about it, because I think the time is now. And, there's not a lot of talk about how people with disabilities will integrate into workplaces and stuff like that.
Yet.
But I think if we all adopted that mantra, could you imagine how many stereotypes and discriminations that could break down? Ageism,
For sure.
Sexism, like all racism. Just if you looked at potential and not limitations. And we've talked before about gatekeeping, about how, the system has this perspective of what is a leader, this sort of like cutout that you have to fit your face into. And it's a certain age, a level of experience, a certain race, a certain gender.
Right.
And if you don't quite fit into that, then you're not seen as a leader. But I love that you're like just putting it out there. Like, this is who I am. And to me, and I think to us on this, in what Stay Spicy is about, is authenticity is leadership.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm here to ruffle feathers, man.
That's the spicy part
Give
of it.
me all the feathers. I'm going to ruffle them all because up until now, you're right. It's been, unless you are a white man wearing a 3-piece suit, you're not a leader, right? But like, that's colonialism. And I'm not here to subscribe to that. And we're trying to change the face of what this is. Even when we opened Ryu, my mom said to me, I think I had pink hair at the time, or blue. My mom said to me, okay, like, you're going to have to change your hair color and you're going to have to start dressing normal, she said. And I looked at her, I was like, why?
Normal.
I'm not normal.
I'm like, who's the boss? And who wrote the dress code? Me, right? So like, no, why do I have to conform to what they are? I'll never do that. And we need to change what leadership looks like. We need to change what leadership is. And like, I think that's how we do it, is just by being our authentic selves and stepping into those leadership roles. Sometimes you don't even know you're stepping into that leadership role.
Yeah.
And just doing it.
I similarly, when I started my business, my mom said to me, she's going to kill me for saying this, but that she's like, well, maybe you shouldn't say asshole anymore. And I was like, why? She said, well, it's not really professional. And I was like, says who? So like, but also that's who I am, I swear. That's why we, on the podcast, we're like, nobody's going to censor us because this is, it's like half the episode would be a bleep.
Well, don't be an asshole maybe, and then I won't say it.
So then instead, in true Lynette fashion, I made a whole merchandise line that said, I have no assholes policy. And when I interview clients, that is my number one rule. I have 3 rules of who I will and won't work with. First is, I have a no assholes policy. And then when I say that, it's also a test of like, how do you react to me saying that?
Yep.
And then the second is this going to be spicy? And the third is are we going to have some fun? Can we have fun with this?
Yeah.
And so like, that's authentic to me, and people can opt out of that because we don't have to work together. I think that's the point, right? Is the world needs more of that, of this is who I am. And you speak out a lot, which is great. And I think even just by, like you said, seeing Rick Hansen, what we see, we believe we can be. And I also have to say I'm really appreciative that you speak out about domestic violence as well, as somebody who has gone through it for a long time, but only recently felt, I wouldn't say comfortable. It's not comfortable. As you said, not comfortable is where growth happens.
That's right.
But, doing some writing publicly and speaking about it. And it's hard. There's a lot of shame ingrained in there. And I can understand why a lot of people don't feel comfortable speaking about it. But when you do, like you said, you open the door for other people to be able to at least not feel alone, but maybe also speak out. I don't know how that process was for you. And if you see yourself as a leader in domestic violence awareness, is that?
That's, no, I've never thought of myself as a leader in that area. Obviously, it was really something hard to go through, but at the same time, like, because I couldn't communicate my feelings, I was very unhappy in my marriage. And this incident, as terrible as it was, gave me my out without any fault being on me. And of course, they twisted it and of course put fault on me. And it could have been a lot worse, that's for sure. But I have a zero tolerance policy. And I told him when we were dating, you raise your hand to me once and I'm done. I won't put up with this. And, hindsight, you can see the signs of the violence progressively getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it finally comes to you, right? I think none of this is easy to navigate. It's not easy to talk about. It's not easy to like go back through and feel. But as people who have survived it, like there's so much power in taking that back. And there's so much power in putting the shame where it belongs, which is not on us. It's on the abuser. Yeah. They need the shame. They should be ashamed of their actions, of their emotions, of not being able to keep control of themselves. That's where that shame belongs. So like when you do that work and you're able to take that shame off yourself and put it back where it belongs, it's so freeing, right? And it's just so like grounding even. And it just gives you this sense of like, what I went through was really, really hard, but had that not happened to me, I wouldn't be as free as I am right now.
I think then same goes for abuse in any context, whether it's relationship or workplace. Yep. Exactly. That there's no shame. It exists, but that the victim should not have to feel shame because there's no shame in being a victim.
Agreed.
And whether or not you speak out about it, I think absolutely it's important to heal and take those steps. Because what I learned as well is if you don't, you're destined to repeat patterns of behavior in all aspects of life. Yeah. And so it is hard work, but it needs to be done. Do you have advice for people who want to become leaders and don't maybe feel like you said, right, when you were 30, you were like, I'm not a leader.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanted to be one, but what in terms of a process, and it could be through a life change, but just somebody who's going through something and just it feels the furthest from a leader. What are some steps they can take?
Oh, good question. I would say first, like find somebody. So whether it's a therapist, a counselor, somebody who you can talk to confidentially, and that they won't judge you and they'll provide you with actual tools that you can use to move through what you're going through. That's step number one. And then doing the work, right? So many of us read the self-help books, we listen to those self-help podcasts, but do we do the homework that they're saying to do in those books? Most of the time, no. And that's why a lot of these aren't effective. If you actually do the work, which means reflecting, which means writing it down, which means looking at the ugly parts of yourself and acknowledging them and saying out loud, I am racist, I am sexist, I am homophobic. Say it. Because until we say it, we can't change it, right? So like these are the things that have helped me a lot in like really recognizing who I am. And then like that makes me a good leader, right? Because I can say to my team, like, hey man, like I had a racist thought this morning as I was driving behind a certain type of car, right? Like that's racist. That's racism, right? And so just acknowledging it. And when we acknowledge these things, we take that power away from that word being so heavy. And like that title doesn't have to define you, but just in that moment, oh my gosh, I was racist, right? So like when you say it, it doesn't feel good, but at the same time, it does, because you're like, I'm in my truth.
For sure. And other people, it's not me. Like
Yes.
the racists are them. The racists are the ones protesting. The racists are the Americans, or whatever the situation is.
Yeah.
We always other people. I could never be that. I could never think that.
Yes.
And sort of define ourselves as not any of those things. And in that way, the biases keep continuing and we just keep perpetuating that stuff. We need to get out of the idea that, you know, those people are that. Yeah. And I just play in this system because it's convenient for me, not knowing that I am absolutely perpetuating like that culture.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you start realizing these things, how do you plant seeds of inclusion in the workplace? Or you don't have a system set, your leadership's a little aloof. How do you start planting those seeds and of leadership inclusion?
I think one thing, a tangible thing that you can do is start praising the people who are of minorities in your workplace. Praise the work that they do. If they've done something good, praise it loudly in front of other people, in front of the boss, in front of the coworkers and stuff, right? Because that's necessary.
Right.
Everybody needs to feel good about the things that they're doing right. And a lot of times we don't get that. And so just loudly praise them.
To make them feel seen.
Yeah. And like you're a part of the team, right?
Valued.
Yes, exactly. And then just being the example, right? Like do the thing that you're saying you're going to do. If you say it, do it. And you might get ostracized for it. You might be the odd duck out in the office for actually doing the things that you're saying you're going to do. But after a while, people will start seeing, oh, like, look how far ahead this person's getting, or look how much ease they have, right? Why aren't they stressed out? Why has their body language changed? And it's because you are authentically yourself. And when you do those things, other people will follow. Right. And they will ask you, how did you do this? Why do you all of a sudden look differently, right? And then you're a leader without even trying to be.
And that's exactly it, right? Don't try to be or try to emulate what somebody else is doing. Come at it with a sense of honesty, humility, authenticity.
Yeah.
And how would you start, I guess, that conversation? If you wanted to have a conversation as a team about inclusion, what are some things you can do to, because they can be, like you said, really uncomfortable. And I do find, to Sherry's point about labels, everybody's very afraid of that label. And I'm working on a project right now around supporting women leaders in a workplace. And I find whenever you go in and you say, we want to hear about the good and the challenges, everybody wants to go, oh, well, I'm not the problem. And I don't do bad things. And they almost look at it like a witch hunt, and it's not. It's intended to be, let's have real open conversations. How do you diffuse that? Do you let that be? How would you even kind of start that as a leader if you haven't had those conversations before in the workplace?
Good question. My workplace is very different, right? Because we have always been inclusive right from day one. And so I don't have a lot of experience in like office spaces. Even before this, I was an X-ray tech. So I worked in the hospital and you know what I mean? Like it was just different environments. I don't know how to answer this. I think just by creating that safe and brave space, right? When we are brave enough to like be authentically ourselves and to, like I said, say these things that we are, then I think like other people will just follow suit. But also just starting with that. That's why like on day one, when our students start, within the first week, I have my disability etiquette talk with them, right? And it's not a you. It's just like, this is how people are perceived. This is kind of the language that we want to see. And then it's like comes down to like small things of like how can you be an ally to people with disabilities, right? Like there's some smaller things that I talk about, like tangible things that you can just do. And so it goes from this conversation of like, oh, maybe I'm the problem, to, oh, these are 3 things that I can do to like help with this. Okay, cool. right? And then it just kind of changes that. So give them tools, give them things to like tangible things that like you can do these things and, you know, you'll feel better about yourself. And I try not to say a good person, bad person, because there's no such thing, right? Even if you are, you know, you have racist thoughts or sexist thoughts or ableist actions and stuff, it doesn't make you a bad person, right? So like we just need to work on those things to be more inclusive.
And I think
that
that's,
answered it.
yeah, I'm hearing label the behavior, not the person.
Yes.
And to Sherry's point, you know, of like, I'm not that, we all have those thoughts from time to time, right? We all have grown up in systems that perpetuate that. So nobody is perfect. Nobody's immune to it. And if you sort of normalize that and labeling the behavior and making an effort to prevent that behavior, then it's not you are a racist, you are ableist. It's the behaviors and the thoughts.
Yeah.
And that can break down, I think, that barrier and that insecurity for people. I agree. I love what you said about the boss has to start the conversation by saying like, these are some mistakes I've made. These are some thoughts I've had that I'm trying to work through. That opens the door for other people.
Yeah. And then sharing those as they come up too, right? Because like
just one time.
Yeah. Like as a keynote speaker, I mean, one of the things like I try to do all the time is just like, I'm not an expert in everything, right? Yes, I'm on this stage and I'm talking to however many people about this topic, but at the same time, I still make mistakes. I'm still a human being. And this, like, I think just sharing that, like that puts a lot of people at ease because I've seen a lot of speakers go onto the stage and be like, I'm absolutely perfect. And this is exactly what I did to be absolutely perfect. And this is what you can do too, to be absolutely perfect.
Ew.
Right? But perfection doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Like none of us are perfect. We're always trying to be better. But yeah, having some humility, admitting your mistakes that like, oh my gosh, look at what I just did. Like that was a racist thing. That was an ableist thing. And I've been disabled for 12 years and I still have ableist beliefs, thoughts, and actions, right? So like, you know, forgive yourself.
I love that. It's like if a keynote gets up and actually talks about if on the topic, things that they made mistakes on, right? Because you're right. Like when you bring a keynote in or a speaker on a topic, the perception is that they're supposed to be the expert, and you can be an expert in something and not have always been perfect.
Well, nobody is.
And it like makes it more accessible to the room.
Yeah.
Right. Because I often will look at these people speaking, and I used to think this a lot about the women leaders that they would bring up on panels and things. And when I was younger, and I would go, well, I don't know how to identify with that because I will never be that, or they come from very different worlds than I do. So how could I ever get there? And I think we all just need to be more of ourselves and more authentically ourselves to give people permission to be themselves and believe that they can get somewhere. So as a new entrepreneur, I'm curious on this one question, so you were new to running a business.
Yeah.
What are some hard leadership lessons you learned?
Oh boy.
Being a new boss.
Oh my gosh. What are some hard leadership lessons I've learned? That nothing is going to go according to plan. Right? You can try to plan out as much as you want, but nothing is going to go according to plan. That you'll be wrong. You're going to be wrong, and it's okay to be wrong. And then again, like we talked about, there's a lot of power in that humility and talking about that openly with your team. And yeah, problems. Oh, I don't know. I mean, just like life lessons, right? Like I had no experience running a business, zero. I had no idea what I was doing. And then, you know, it's a nonprofit business on top of that. So there's more things you have to do as a nonprofit organization that like, I just really had no idea. It took me a couple of years to figure out how to run a board. I had no idea what I was doing. So it's just like learning curve after learning curve. Yeah. But yeah, I think just, you know, talking about the things, being open about it, sharing that you're not perfect with everybody because you're not, is really, I don't know, it just helps you be in this role and like still keep your expectations like achievable. You know, like if at first I was trying to be this perfect boss that, you know what I mean? And like this I can't even find my words, what society has told me a perfect boss is.
Yes.
That's what I tried to be.
Which is what?
I don't know, a white man.
In 3-piece suit.
Right?
I mean, I do like wearing vests, but
Well,
Not a Patagonian sight around here.
and that you like are, always using professional language and whatever.
yeah,
Like,
you don't say asshole apparently.
yeah. Like I am not an academic by any means, and never have I inferred that I was or am. So I think it's just, there's so much power in just being okay with who you are. And if people judge you, they judge you. That's on them.
Yeah. And I feel like too, when you start a business, like your vision can be so rock solid about what you want to accomplish in the next 5 years or whatever. But the trip there is it's bumpy. Like it's definitely requires you to put a lot of work in. There's a lot of mistakes. There's a lot of that. And I think sometimes we get caught up in that. Am I doing this right? But the vision's always there. The guiding star is always there. So I think we need to be gentler on ourselves in business when we run the business, because we are going in the right direction. It's the people part of it, right?
Yeah. And like our business is different than any other business in Edmonton. Even as far as activity-based therapy centers, like our business, we are one of the only centers in the world that works with children and adults at the same time. Most are split, either peds or adults, where we have both. And like our business model is unlike any others as well. So there hasn't been a blueprint of, this is exactly what you do. So yeah, it's been very, very difficult. We've hit a lot of roadblocks and a lot of pushback from many different types of communities because, first of all, people don't believe in recovery, so they don't think you can get better. The medical system is a huge proponent in that they don't think you can get better. And so, like I said, we've had a lot of pushback, a lot of hurdles, and what we have done is just stick to what we do, and the results will speak for themselves, and that's what's happening. And so 7.5 years later, now we're working with the healthcare system, right? We're getting referrals from them and stuff because now they're starting to see our clients who are their patients going back to them and they're getting better, right?
Wow.
I take that as a leadership lesson being, I was about to say, don't stop believing in yourself, but I didn't mean to do like a journey. Don't worry, I won't start singing. That's a different episode. But yeah, you have to be the one who believes in yourself the most as the leader.
Yes.
Because I certainly found that people don't think to give leaders positive feedback or encouragement, and you have to kind of have your own supply. But on top of that, surround yourself with other people who get it and who can give you that encouragement. Yeah. Like Sherry is my biggest hype man, and but she also, because she's been at this from an entrepreneur's perspective a lot longer than I have, I take so much wisdom from her where she says things like, don't wait for it to be perfect. You have to just get it out, and then you can change it, you can adapt it. But we get frozen in this it has to be the perfect thing or it has to be right. And when you're doing something brand new, you don't know what's right. You just have to try.
Right.
Yep.
And then adapt it as you go, because there is no blueprint.
No.
And I'd say treat all leadership like that too, right? As if there's no blueprint.
Yeah.
Maybe don't take your cues from someone else because nobody is you.
Yeah, and you can definitely take tips and direction from other people, right? And I firmly believe in your network is your net worth. And small habits, right? Darren Hardy talks about it all the time, the compound effect, where you make small changes every day and it leads up to these huge changes in your life. And sometimes we don't see what these little things are until we've hit that huge thing. We're like, oh man, look at this. Look how awesome my life is right now. How did this happen? Right? And then it takes reflection onto and then when you realize what that is, then you can do it with intent every day. So having those mentors in place is really important. And I listen to my Darren Daily video every day when I'm brushing my teeth. It's just part of my routine. And the things he talks about daily impact not only just me as a human being, but as a boss, as a leader, as a daughter, as a friend. And so I think you can take what other people are saying about leadership and their styles of it and just completely roll it into who you are and what you want your leadership style to be.
I have one last question for you.
Sure.
So Sherry and I are big proponents of journaling. We talked a lot about that on season 1 when we talked about personal brand. And so I know you journal, and you actually share something on Instagram, I think almost every day, about gratitude. Tell me about that and how that factors in.
Yeah, gratitude is a huge part of my personal brand, of who I am. And it's been studied time and time again and it helps with like anxiety, depression, because when you're grateful for what you have, you don't have time, like your mind doesn't have time to think about the anxiety and depression. Right. And like when, every day I write 3 things I'm grateful for, a positive affirmation, and 3 things I'm open to receiving. And the key part about what you're open to receiving is when you write it, always end it with ease, because the universe will give it to you, but it might not be with ease, right? So always, whenever you're asking for something, ask for it with ease. And what this practice has done for me is like, once you've written down all the generic things, family, friends, housing, like all the generic stuff that we're grateful for, it forces you to look in your day for things to be grateful for tomorrow, right? And so it's something as simple as windshield washer fluid. I'm grateful for Domo gas stations because I haven't pumped my own gas in over 12 years. Right. And as a wheelchair user, like something a lot of people don't think about is how do you pump your gas and the amount of energy it takes to get in and out of your car. Right. And also when I'm at Domo and somebody is pumping my gas, I always tell them like, hey, I'm a wheelchair user and you doing this job makes my life so much easier. So thank you so much. I need you to do this job.
I love that.
Give them pride. Right? Because it's a job that not a lot of people would take pride in, but like without them, my life becomes a lot harder. So I try to pass on that, like you're doing something very important here, even though you think this is a minuscule job, right? But yeah, gratitude, like it really does make you look in your day for things to be grateful for. And when we appreciate what we have, like the cliche saying goes, what we have becomes enough. And then you're not always searching for outside validation or external things to make you happy. I mean, I'm every day grateful for my hands, grateful for my hands. If I didn't have my hands, my independence would be greatly affected, right? A lot of my friends who are quadriplegics, I see that on the daily with them, right? On the days when I don't want to work out, I think of the people who would kill to have the mobility that I have, right? And I mean, like I would kill to have the mobility you guys have, right? So appreciate it.
Yeah. So when I get out of bed, all creaky, be grateful that I can.
That your body creaks and you're able to move it that way.
And we should all stop kind of complaining about our aches and pains and things and be grateful for what we do have.
I mean, complaining is normal, right? But like also appreciate what you have. And it's that perspective that, seeing somebody with a disability oftentimes gives you that perspective of like, oh, wow, like things could be a lot harder, right? And like I also try to change what people's belief system is about working out. So many people think it's a punishment.
Right.
It's a privilege.
Yeah.
If you have a body that moves, move it. Because one day you're not going to be able to move it anymore. And then you're going to regret, I wish I could run those set of stairs one more time. I wish I could do that roundhouse kick one more time.
Yeah. My last thought, just in response to your Domo story, before Sherry takes us home, is that just a reminder to our listeners, because Sherry and I really wanted to bring the perspective this season of people who are in traditional leadership positions, and also people who aren't. And just that was a perfect story of how you can be a leader in someone else's story and someone else's life without being their boss. So I hope that's something that our listeners take from today. So thank you for that, Bean.
Of course. Thank you.
And on the topic of gratitude, I'm very grateful for this conversation this morning. To meet you and you're such a badass warrior, Bean.
Thank you.
And, for those who want to learn more about you, more about your journey, where can they find you online?
Everywhere almost.
Follow her on Instagram because she does her daily gratitude thing, and it's the best part of my day.
Yeah. My Instagram is at Branzoid, BRANZOID. My website is callmebean.com, or you can check out Reyu at reyu.ca. Or you can just Google Bean Gill and there'll be hundreds of pages of things because I don't like to stay quiet and I use my platform for everything that I possibly can.
And we're grateful for that too.
Yes, and thank you for joining us to use our platform to spread the message and get more word out about leadership experiences. So that's a wrap for this episode. And follow Bean on social media. Get your gratitude, your daily gratitudes. We're also on social media at Stay Spicy Inc. So give us a follow as well. And we're going to continue these leadership conversations over the coming months. So thank you, everyone. And
Stay spicy.
Thanks for listening to the Stay Spicy podcast.
We love hearing from our listeners and want you to be part of our community. So connect with us on social media at Stay Spicy Inc.
And visit us online at stayspicy.ca.